Galactic Emperor pointed and laughed. The Baba Yaga snapped his arm without moving her. Arrival of the outlier. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Concord shimmered with silver light, its towering columns humming faintly with embedded quantum conduits. Ambassadors from across the known galaxy filled the concentric tiers surrounding the central dais. Each one bore the insignia of power: plasma crests, neural lace diadems, shimmering bioskins, all symbols of a civilization advanced, proud, and unchallenged. At the center of it all sat the Galactic Emperor, Forkale the Eternal, a being older than most stars, part machine, part something else. Encased in obsidian exoskin, his face hidden behind a glimmering helm, Forkale had not risen from his throne in 1,000 years. He didn't need to. Power bent to him, and today he intended to amuse himself. "She comes alone," he said, his voice a low chime that vibrated through the marble beneath their feet. "A species with barely 300 years of faster-than-light travel sends a woman." Snickers rippled through the chamber. Alien tones, clicks, trills, vibrations. Even the Verkin, whose mouths were too complex to laugh properly, blinked in amusement. A single figure walked across the hall's gleaming floor. No entourage, no armor, no translation drones. Just a woman, human, draped in a simple black dress adorned with embroidery that glinted like starlight. Her gray hair was pulled into a tight bun. She walked slowly, deliberately, a cane tapping softly at her side, though she seemed not to lean on it. She does not even run diagnostics. No shields, no implants. The Emperor lifted one gloved hand and gestured mockingly. Humanity always did bring sticks to gunfights. Another wave of laughter. The woman stopped before the dais, not even looking up. "I expected your emissary, not your grandmother," Forkale said, rising now from his throne for the first time in centuries. The chamber silenced. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. "I am what Earth sends," she replied, voice calm, aged like old soil. "And you will regret asking for more." Forkale laughed, deep, ringing, and theatrical. "Tell me, Hag of Earth, do you speak for your entire kind? Do they now dress you in black robes and feed you tales of power?" The woman didn't answer. He stepped down from his throne, towering over her. "Do you know who I am?" "No," she said simply. Gasps rippled through the tears. Forkale's armor flexed. From the ceiling, mechanical sentries activated, red eyes gleaming. The Emperor pointed at her with a mocking flourish. Let it be remembered that the last words of the Earth envoy were no. He laughed again, and then, without warning, his arm bent backward with a sickening crunch. The chamber went silent. A few gasps, a whimper from a junior diplomat. Forkale staggered, dropping to one knee, his shattered arm dangling like a vine. The woman hadn't moved. He looked up at her, breathing heavier now, pain evident even through his exoskin. What did you do?" She met his gaze for the first time. Her eyes were dark, not black, but deep, like the space between galaxies. "I reminded the galaxy," she said, "that you have forgotten fear." The sentries twitched, unsure whether to attack. A wave of unease swept the hall. "You dare use forbidden tech," spat an ambassador from the Zrel Combine. "This isn't tech," she whispered. "This is memory. Blood. Promise. You've ruled by machines and threats for too long. Earth remembers other ways." Forkale struggled to his feet. "You will answer for this." "I just did." She turned, cane tapping once more as she began her slow walk back across the gleaming floor. Forkale stood still, holding his broken arm close, the laughter gone from his voice, the air thick with something no one in the hall could name. No guard stopped her. No one spoke. And behind her, the throne of the Eternal Emperor stood empty, humming softly, unsure of who now held the power. Power without motion. The Emperor's private chamber was silent, lit only by the faint glow of diagnostic holos flickering over his broken arm. Bone, nerve, and synthetic fiber twisted into a spiraled mess. Med drones hovered, hesitant. They could mend flesh. They could reweave tissue. But they couldn't explain how the damage had happened. She touched nothing. Forkale growled, his voice now raw. No implant, no field, no tech. The High Warden of Sensors, a three-eyed insectoid in a hovering cradle, blinked anxiously. We detected no emissions, no kinetic displacement, no temporal distortion. It is unquantifiable. Impossible, Forkale snapped. Then quieter, or forgotten. He dismissed them all and stood alone, staring at the reflection of his shattered arm in the polished obsidian of his chamber wall. It throbbed not just with pain, but with something more dangerous, doubt. Outside, the galaxy whispered. Word of the incident was already leaking through diplomatic channels. Rumors bred faster than truth. Some claimed she spoke in an ancient tongue that melted circuits. Others said she never blinked. One said she had walked through the Emperor's throne itself and emerged whole. None of them understood, but all of them felt it. Fear. Back on Earth, a council convened beneath Mount Elbrus, deep below the crust, inside a chamber carved by minds and tools never made public. The Baba Yaga stood at the center, hands folded. Around her sat figures clothed not in uniform, but in time, gray-eyed archivists, void walkers, machine shamans, and psionic tacticians whose existence will be denied by every official channel. "You made your move early," said one, a man with eyes like candle flames. "They laughed," she replied. "It was time. And now?" They listened. A hollow screen shimmered to life, displaying a dozen galactic signatures, military fleet movements, emergency conclaves, special ops deployments. "They fear retaliation," said a woman in flowing silver. "They want to dissect what you did. They won't find anything they understand," Baba Yaga said. "Because we didn't build it. We became it." There was a silence then, shared among those who had spent lifetimes preparing not for war, but for the moment before war. The moment when silence could speak louder than weapons. In the Galactic Concord, confusion reigned. Forkale had ordered the Earth envoy's name struck from the registry. He had erased the footage, but the minds of the diplomats could not be erased. She had snapped the Emperor's arm without lifting a hand. That wasn't diplomacy. That was power. Power none of them understood. Among the diplomats, theories collided like comets. She used some sort of brainwave manipulation, insisted a Zarn researcher. No, it was a nanofield. Invisible, programmed to mimic sorcery, said of election tactician. "You all missed the point," muttered an old Tari historian, ignored in the corner. "It doesn't matter how she did it. It matters that she could." Still, the official record claimed a malfunction. Emperor Forkale suffered a neural feedback injury during proceedings, the bulletin read. "The Earth envoy has returned safely. No violation occurred, but the silence spoke louder than the lie." And then came the message. It arrived as a dream. One by one, leaders of major galactic powers reported waking in the night with a voice, hers, whispering in a tongue they did not know, yet understood. Words not of threat, but of reminder. This galaxy wants its stories. Then it built machines and forgot. We are what remains. Remember. Back in the Grand Hall, they gathered again, out of fear, not ceremony. The Emperor, arm newly repaired and encased in white armor, stood before them. "She has declared war," one counselor said. "No," Forkale said. "She has declared memory." The others looked at each other, uncomprehending. "We've faced weapons. We've faced plagues. We've faced black holes. But this is something older than all of them." "You mean magic?" Someone scoffed. Forkale's voice dropped. "I mean humanity." He stepped away from the podium, leaving the Concord in murmurs. The whisper of fear had turned to a drumbeat of unease. And in distant corners of the galaxy, where stars flickered against dark nebulae, people began to listen, not to the Empire, but to the silence that came after laughter. The Witches' War. The first shot was fired by the Yevhoth Ascendancy. They had no interest in subtlety. A fleet of 60 Dreadnought-class warships warped into Sol's outer system, blotting out Neptune's orbit like a swarm of steel bees. Their orders were clear. Seize Earth, capture its leadership, and extract the source of the so-called Baba Yaga event. What they expected was resistance. What they found was absence. No transmissions, no defensive formations, no planetary shields. Only Saturn's rings humming slightly out of tune. And then the storm began. One by one, the dreadnoughts lost internal cohesion. Walls twisted like soft wax. Artificial gravity reversed. Some ships ruptured from the inside, their hulls torn apart by something unseen. Others simply vanished. No wreckage, no distress calls, just gone. Admiral Krellick of the Yevhoth reported a whisper. No comms, no interface, just a voice inside his mind as the floor of his command deck folded into itself. You came with weapons. You should have come with candles. No one escaped. The Galactic Concord labeled it a fluke, a defense system too advanced for Earth's known capabilities. But in backrooms and encrypted channels, the truth became harder to ignore. 3 more fleets sent probing expeditions. None returned. On Sarinthia, 4, a conclave of cyber augurs attempted to trace the source of Baba Yaga's psychic signature. Their minds collapsed mid-ritual. One of them, before dying, carved a spiral into the metal floor with her fingernail. In the depths of the Concord archives, ancient records were unsealed. Human folklore, long catalogued and dismissed as primitive, was now studied with urgency. Baba Yaga's name recurred across centuries, across cultures. She lives in a hut with chicken legs, muttered one archivist, sleepless and terrified. She eats children, or protects them. It's unclear. She is a witch, said another. But not just that. She's a symbol, a warning. A warning of what? Of what happens when the forgotten are remembered. Earth, meanwhile, remained silent. Not passive, present, quiet like a hell breath. Not a single broadcast, not a single threat. Only small, inexplicable signs. A Concorde surveillance drone approached Mars and turned into a Raven mid-flight before disintegrating. A mercenary team attempted to infiltrate a human moonbase. They emerged hours later, aged decades, teeth chattering, eyes wild. They spoke of a forest that had not been there before. Trees that bled light. Songs without singers. The galaxy began to fracture. Some species, long under the Empire's shadow, began to rally behind Earth. Not out of alliance, but awe. The Tauri Council severed trade routes with Concord systems. The Sahari Drift cities pledged neutrality and refused to host Concord fleets. The term Baba Yaga Protocol began to circulate, not officially, but in whispers. It meant, leave Earth alone. In a war chamber orbiting the dead moon Nakaroth, the Emperor faced his high strategos. She is not waging war, the strategos said. She is unmaking it. She is showing them what fear looks like, Forcale corrected. She understands something we forgot. He moved to the edge of the holomap, stars, ships, lines of engagement blinking uselessly. We made war predictable, measurable, tactical. She brought myth into it. And myths don't obey strategy. The strategos hesitated. Shall we open negotiations? Forcale turned, one hand flexing against the scar of his rebuilt arm. With whom? We don't know who leads them anymore. We don't know if she's a symbol, a weapon, or a god. A pause. What if she is all 3? The Emperor did not answer. He watched the stars fade from the display one by one. Systems where his control had once been absolute, where now silence reigned. Far away, in a temple hidden in Earth's shadow, the Baba Yaga sat alone, feeding small birds from her palm. They want to understand you, said a voice in the shadows. She smiled without turning. Let them try. It is the last thing they will do as rulers. They will not stop. They don't need to, she said softly. They need to remember. She rose, slow but strong, the floor humming beneath her bare feet. And when they do, she whispered, the galaxy will kneel. Not because it must, but because it understands. Behind her, the shadows moved. Not figures, not soldiers, but stories walking, balance of the broken. The Galactic Concord had no answer for silence. They had tried everything. After the fall of 3 fleets and a dozen failed probes, they had retreated into their fortress worlds. Their leaders spoke in hushed tones, tapping ancient data terminals, searching for solutions that didn't exist. The records were clear. Humanity, once considered a backwater species, had become something else. something beyond their understanding. And it was something the Emperor, despite his centuries of knowledge, had underestimated. Forkale stood in the shadows of his private observatory, gazing out at the endless expanse of space. His armor shimmered like a dark star as the final reports from his commanders scrolled across the screens before him. Wordlessly, he dismissed them. They didn't matter. The war was over before it had begun. Why won't she finish it? He muttered to himself. His question hung in the air, unasked by the others in the chamber, because none of them dared ask it aloud. The truth had become clear. Earth had no desire to conquer the galaxy. It had only one goal: to remind the galaxy of something it had forgotten. Across the galaxy, whispers of the Baba Yaga were no longer just stories, they were teachings. Old mythologies were being revived, rewritten, and examined with trembling hands. Earth's myths were no longer considered childish fables. Now, they were a warning, a legacy. And still, the Emperor did nothing. His military stood ready, though they had no orders to follow. His fleet was intact, but it did not move. His people watched him, waiting. At the edge of the galaxy, hidden among the gas giants of the Andromeda Nebula, the true leaders of the galaxy gathered. Representatives of the ancient species, those who had shaped the first empires, came together in secret. They were the last of their kind, immortal, eternal, their bloodlines stretching back millennia. They had built the Concord with their hands, and now they feared a single human whisper. "I do not understand," said Laren, an enigmatic being from the Olorian system. She was a creature of liquid light and shifting form, her voice a melody that transcended thought. "Why does she not strike? We gave her the power. Why does she simply watch?" The figure beside her, a tall and angular being from the Hetheri Dominion, looked toward the projection of Earth. "She does not strike because she does not need to. What is she waiting for?" Laren pressed, her voice strained. "For the galaxy to bow before her? To kneel?" "No," the Hetheri said, his voice dark with ancient wisdom. "She is waiting for us to remember. Not to obey, but to remember." Back on Earth, the Baba Yaga stood alone in her sanctum, an ancient structure deep beneath the surface of the earth, hidden from all but the most diligent of searchers. The walls here were adorned with symbols older than even the stars themselves, etched in forgotten languages that had once been the fabric of the universe. A figure appeared before her, cloaked in the deepest shadows. She did not flinch. The figure was no surprise. It was always the same one who came to her in times like these. "You will not stop," the voice said, low and calm. The voice of the Emperor. "No," Baba Yaga replied, her eyes still fixed on the swirling patterns that decorated the walls. "I will not." "You will force us to kneel," the voice said. "No," Baba Yaga whispered, turning to face the shadow. "I will force you to remember." The figure faltered, the shadows around it twitching as though caught in a gust of wind. It could not understand her words, for its mind was consumed with thoughts of conquest, of power. It only knew to command, to conquer, to break. "You have forgotten that you are not the ones who rule," Baba Yaga said softly, walking toward the figure. "You've forgotten that the true power is never in domination. It is in knowing." The Emperor's emissary hesitated. "You cannot rule through knowledge alone. And yet I have." Baba Yaga's voice was calm, resolute. "I have ruled for centuries, long before your empire even thought to carve out stars for itself." With that, the figure collapsed to its knees, its form flickering like a broken hologram. Baba Yaga reached out, her hand a silent gesture, and the figure stood, once again, restored but not quite the same. Something had shifted. "We are not your enemies," the figure said, its voice softer now. "You are our salvation." "No," she said, her voice final. "You are your own, and the galaxy is not mine to save. It is yours, if you choose." The figure nodded, and Baba Yaga turned her back, slowly walking toward the inner sanctum of the temple. Behind her, the figure stood still, finally understanding. The Emperor sat alone in the cold, vast chamber of his palace. For the first time in centuries, his mind was clouded. His empire was vast but hollow. His armies were mighty but uncertain. And Earth? Earth was something far more dangerous than he had ever anticipated. Baba Yaga had not sought victory. She had not demanded submission. She had simply reminded the galaxy of its true power. The galaxy would not kneel to her. It would stand, or it would fall. And the Emperor, for the first time, understood that the true battle had never been about strength. It had always been about remembering who you were.